Do as I say, not as I do. A classic phrase I think should be the tagline for the Young Turks channel. The Young Turks, we believe fat shaming is wrong.
It's the classic bullying move where you want to feel better about yourself, so you look to someone and pick on their imperfections to feel good about yourself.
Unless you disagree with us and are fat.
Get off the stage, you fat fuck!
Don't pretend to care about the health of presidential candidates when you obviously don't.
Trump supporters, don't pretend that you care about Hillary Clinton's health. You don't like her.
Unless it's the health of the candidate I oppose, in which case that information is vital.
Wants to have the most important job in the whole wide world. And what, we're not supposed to talk about his health because it would be impolite?
Don't imply that you're somehow better than other people.
So fuck you about how somehow you're better, Rudy Giuliani, than anybody else.
Unless you're clearly better than other people.
I'm fucking better than you, okay? Much better than you. You are garbage.
Little known piece of Young Turks trivia, the context for that famous I'm better than you Anna Kasparian rant is that she doesn't take Harambe memes lightly like you do, you scumbag. She's sensitive to the racial implications of spamming a gorilla picture. You know, I've seen a long list of things that Harambe died for, but this bullshit ain't on it. It's that lack of consistency that makes the Young Turks insufferable. It's not just what they say. It's their inability to abide by the standards they expect of everyone else. Taken alone, there are actually times I agree with Cenk and the gang on general topics or matters of principle. And no, I'm not drinking any leftover eggnog. Take this example of Cenk talking about the press rushing to push a narrative rather than assemble all of the necessary facts in a story.
Yeah, who cares? We're not going to look into it. We're the media. Yeah. No, we hype up dangers, so-called dangers. So ask yourself, is it the danger that they're covering? Or is the coverage dictated by certain preconceptions, stereotypes, and other messages that they want to push?
To Cenk's credit, we should view news media from this skeptical perspective, and we should ask ourselves, to what extent are the facts driving the reporting? Or alternatively, to what extent are pre-existing narratives driving the reporting? Those are great questions. Unfortunately, the context for Cenk's commentary is him providing coverage dictated by those preconceptions, stereotypes, and other messages he wants to push. Let's get the story. What Cenk is talking about is a story that broke the week before the election. An unknown arsonist burned a Mississippi black church and spray-painted "Vote Trump" on its exterior wall. At the time the Young Turks first discussed the story, there were no suspects and no arrests. In other words, at the time, we didn't know who did it, much less why. And Cenk and the Young Turks opened their coverage with this.
And in addition to being set on fire, it also had "Vote Trump" spray painted on it in big letters. So there
it could be a Democrat. It could be a liberal. You don't know.
Could be
you
a
don't
liberal.
know.
Could be Black Lives Matter. Perhaps not.
Yeah, but that's just it. You don't know. That's sarcastic Cenk mocking those, noting the key missing information in this case. That's sarcastic Cenk providing more useful analysis than sincere Cenk. The story continued.
Are we covering it nonstop? No, this is the last you'll ever hear of this. So mainstream media, I don't know how much they covered it today, but they're done with it. Never get any coverage tomorrow, and we'll all go on with our lives.
Even with the benefit of hindsight, that's not a smart prediction to make. This was a serious crime. Identifying a suspect in this case would accordingly be serious news. Who could have foreseen that the police would investigate and that the media would follow up with the story's developments?
It's not what the community was expecting at all. Tonight, a member of the very church that was burned down is in custody. 45-year-old Andrew McClinton is himself an African-American. He was arrested in Greenville, where Hopewell Missionary Baptist Church was burned and vandalized.
So yeah, sarcastic Cenk, it could be a Democrat. It could be a liberal. It could be a member of the church itself. This is Cenk and the Young Turks telling us to be wary of how preconceptions drive reporting while providing reporting driven by preconceptions. Just look at their set. Deface of Trump supporters, presuming this was a politically motivated hate crime committed by a white supremacist Trump supporter. without any factual basis for doing so. And that's just the start of the problems with this segment. If you take a foundational missing piece of information for granted, as they have, it only gets worse when you throw in supplementary arguments for your case. If the main premise is assumed rather than demonstrated, you're going to have a bad time.
Now imagine if you had a Muslim who went in and murdered white Christians in some place like South Carolina.
I don't have to imagine. There are plenty of examples.
Imagine a Muslim goes in, has a manifesto. I did this for Islam and Allah, and I'd like to murder white people to start a war between Islam and Christianity. He boom, 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 shoots all those people. Do you think we'd ever hear the end of it? No. The media has decided, I don't want to cover that. I don't want to create hysteria around that. I want to create hysteria around Islam.
I don't know what news Cenk is watching that is overly eager to demonize Islam. I often talk about the exact opposite. Media that hesitates to discuss the role of Islamic ideology in attacks that are clearly motivated by Islamic ideology. The Ohio State attacker? I mean, sure, he wrote a Facebook post telling us why he did it, but the motives are unclear.
The post ends on a chilling note. By Allah, I am willing to kill 1 billion infidels in retribution for a single disabled Muslim. Authorities are still a long way from knowing what motivated Artan to attack his fellow students at Ohio State.
The Orlando Pulse nightclub shooter. I mean, sure, he pledged allegiance to ISIS.
The man that the police say was the gunman called a 911 phone number in Florida, and once the operator answered, swore his allegiance to al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS.
But it might have been incidental.
People say these things all the time on social media.
Yeah, people post these things on social media all the time. Hell, even Pete Williams himself does it. And don't forget the San Bernardino attack. Don't jump to the knee-jerk conclusion of Islamic motive. Could have been that damn soda machine in the break room that eats your money.
It is possible that this was terrorist related, but we don't know. It's also possible that this was workplace related.
I wish I could ask Cenk for just one example of the mainstream media being overly aggressive in blaming Islamic ideology for anything. Let's not imagine. Provide a case illustrating what you're talking about.
By the way, do you know that you're 7 times more likely to be killed by a right-wing extremist in America than by a Muslim extremist?
Now, this is one of those claims that falls apart immediately when faced with even a moment of critical thought. 7 times more likely to die from a right-wing extremist than a Muslim extremist. Over 2,700 people died in the 9/11 attacks. Are you telling me that the KKK and company have a secret cemetery of some 20,000 victims? Let's see how they're getting this number. The source is this study from something called the New American Foundation, and right away, if you look at their data, you might notice something missing right about here in the timeline. I vaguely remember a jihadist attack around that point in time, one that seems to be excluded in this analysis. Oh, but hey, how convenient. This study is on terrorism in America after 9/11. So remember, jihadism is actually a comparatively small threat, as long as you don't count the worst terrorist attack in American history.
Now, there is a little bit of silver lining of good news in that we were talking earlier today about when the Republican office was firebombed, the Democratic Party raised money to help rebuild it, and JR jokingly wondered if Trump supporters would, because this apparently was done by a Trump supporter, would raise money to fix it because of their apparent implication there. Probably isn't going to happen.
But why wouldn't that happen?
It never happens the other way because they actually don't give a shit about this.
I'm still glad they did it, but yeah, you don't expect it to go the other way.
Yeah, I'm not telling them not to. I wouldn't give them a dime.
Now that the truth is out, unsurprisingly, the GoFundMe page for the church has been taken down. But at its height, it reached over $240,000 in contributions from almost 7,000 donors. I can't presently identify specifically who supported it, but there is evidence of Trump supporters contributing, and the cause was celebrated in the Donald subreddit. I don't like the argument that one side has a monopoly on big-heartedness or charitable giving, but if you are going to make that argument, there is plenty of evidence to suggest the Young Turks have it backwards. The Generosity Index, constructed by the Catalog for Philanthropy, found deep red Bible Belt states to be the most generous, compared to less generous but deep blue New England states. Analysis of IRS and voting data show the top 15 most generous states in 2012 voted Republican, and all but 2 of the bottom 15 cheapskates voted Democrat. There are entire books of empirical analysis on the topic. Who Really Cares by Arthur Brooks finds that despite having less income, self-described conservative households give 30% more than self-described liberal households. And all of this despite the fact that charities tend to be controlled by people with liberal political philosophies, at least according to analysis by David Horowitz. I'd have to dig into these analyses more before I'd be comfortable concluding with confidence that conservatives are more charitably generous than liberals. But for the Young Turks to suggest that conservatives aren't charitable, or more specifically, that conservatives only give when the cause aligns with their political ideology, that is insane. That is a claim completely free of evidence. The only generosity I can demonstrate conclusively is the Young Turks' generosity with nonsense. They provided abundantly, and indeed, there's plenty more here. You may be wondering if the show has responded to the new facts in the case, that the suspect is a black church member, not a white supremacist Trump supporter, and that their previous discussion was unqualified bullshit. Indeed, they have.
I remember when we covered this story in the first place, we were enraged by it. But maybe because he has a track record of stealing things, maybe he stole something from the church but burned it down to cover it up and writes Vote Trump to make it seem like it's political. Maybe he's crazy. Maybe, so let the authorities sort that out.
Okay, so less facts available, and Cenk mocks anyone noting the missing information. More facts available, and Cenk says, well, let's see what the police have to say. Let's not rush to conclusions.
It doesn't make it any better that it was a parishioner. You could argue that it makes it worse.
No, it makes it, yeah. I mean, look, it's terrible regardless.
The question is not, was the crime bad or not? The question is, did you report and analyze it properly? If I tell you 9/11 was an inside job and you say, no, it wasn't, it was Al-Qaeda jihadists, and my response is, well, it was pretty bad either way. That does nothing to justify my looseness with the facts, and it's especially unsatisfying if I've just finished lecturing you about not being loose with the facts. And just in case this void of zero self-awareness isn't expansive enough for you, Cenk's got one more zinger.
Hey, look, there's a lot of things that are annoying, horrible, etc. on the internet.
The internet is the longest parade of horribles the earth has ever known, but at this point, I'd place the Young Turks behind only ISIS beheadings and Lena Dunham's Instagram in the rankings. And the gap is closing fast. But like finding suspects in arson cases, I'll leave that judgment to the professionals. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Twitter. That is at Matt C on YT. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Okay, bye.